Now, obviously, there's different schools of thought on this. What does it mean to the fans? Will it, in fact, have any impact on Peter V'landys, who has always been and seen to be a very, very tough and strong negotiator? Let's just start with the action itself, Dave Riccio. Is it just and describe what's going on at the moment?
I wonder if they've thought it through, to be honest, the RLPA. I'm wondering if they've had a look at the player contracts and realised that they are actually legally bound to promote the game. It's part of their contract. And if they are in breach of that, this does open the door for the potential of clubs having the power to tear up that contract. If you are in breach of your contract, it does hand over the power to the clubs. Now, whether it gets to that point, I would doubt. But it has opened the door. Now, I just wondered whether they've thought this through, the RLPA, to get to this point where they are blocking out the media and the fans. Now, if you are in a, let's call this a 20-month tussle between the NRL and the RLPA, to get your messaging across, why would you pee off the media by blocking them out? Why would you also block out the broadcasters who tip in $500 million, over was it $2 billion over a 5-year deal? Why would you block them out? Why would you bite the hand that feeds you? I just don't understand why they chose this path.
Yeah, but that's any industrial action. That's why does workers in trains withdraw their labour so that it affects the commuters? I mean, that's what you have to do, don't you? If you're going to make an impact and want to make change, you have to make an impact. And bite the hand that feeds you. How is that?
But wouldn't they, Dave, think that the relationship? Obviously, they don't probably have a direct relationship with media outlets or the corporate partners, but the NRL obviously do. So Look, from my understanding, didn't the NRL walk away from the table, gave the RLPA an ultimatum?
You can't say they have no relationship with the broadcasters. The broadcasters are the primary avenue of their salary. They pay the most. But in order for them to earn their salaries, the broadcasters. Why would they do that to the broadcasters? I'm just saying that the relationship the broadcasters obviously have and the corporate partnerships have with the game, then wouldn't they be expecting then the broadcasters to go to the game and say, get this sorted out? Absolutely.
I mean, what other action?
Would, and it hasn't happened.
What other action could have they taken, Dave?
I would have thought covering the NRL logo would have been a sure sign protest against the game.
Wouldn't that also be probably
breach of contract?
Breach of contract. I mean, whatever they try and do is going to be breach of contract, right? So, but what I think they want to do, what the outcome of their after is to get the NRL back to the table with an independent mediator, right? So, from what I can understand, I'm not sure whether V'landys and Abdo have been involved in negotiations a lot of late. I think Hugh Marks came in to represent the NRL at a certain level and apparently did some really good things. But it's got to the point now where the RLPA feel like they've been frozen out of agreeing on, there's a few different things around revenue share model and full disclosure of financials, playing data, medical and other control without consent, control of operations, costs to the RLPA. So some things that are pretty important that they want clarity on, and they feel like the NRL gave them an ultimatum of this is the way that it is. If you're not happy with that, well then take it or leave it. So I just don't know what other option they had, Dave. Can someone explain that?
Can someone explain that, Gertz? Because I don't understand what the core issue that is causing you to block yourself out from the very people who fund you. The broadcasters and the fans who buy tickets and merchandise.
Well, it doesn't really affect the fans that much, Dave.
Is it because the minimum wage is not high enough at $150,000?
It's not about the minimum wage.
Or is it because the salary cap didn't grow enough?
But if you want to start
24%?
talking about the minimum wage, so how many people are registered to play the game in Australia in the NRL? How many hundreds of thousands of people? So you've got guys. So what have we got? 300 or 400 professionals. So the top 1 or 2%. In their field, and people are worried about how much they're getting paid and their life's work. So I don't think it's so much about minimum wage. I think it's about some of the other issues that we spoke about that they want some clarity on and want some control over.
The feedback is that the players were concerned about a trade window. Now the NRL wanted a trade window. Now, the players don't want it. They think it's too much of a disruption on families. You cop an injury, and suddenly, you're not being able to move. So the players have pushed back heavily on this. Well, in order to get a deal done, the NRL says, sweet, no dramas. We'll take the trade window off the discussion.
Yeah. Do you think it's fair, though, when you've got was it the last CBA where there was a revenue share model was agreed upon from the NRL and the RLPA?
Yep.
So with a revenue share model, Dave, don't you think it's fair and reasonable that all the financials are disclosed so that you understand what the revenue is?
Yep.
And has that been disclosed to the RLPA? Because I wouldn't even be moving past that point if I was part of that negotiation, because how can you have a revenue share when you don't actually know what the revenue is?
My understanding is that negotiations have moved to a stage where the NRL are content for the RLPA to have a joint share model. The governing body of the this is the point of an independent commission, Girds. It's there for a reason. They're the governing body of the game. They deserve to have a say on the framework of how the revenue is cut up. They have the NRL. My understanding is don't have a problem with the RLPA being a part of that process.
Well, the RLPA can't even get a look at the revenue. They feel like they can't. They haven't been shown the real numbers, and apparently now there's been so much disinformation given that there's no trust in that relationship, and that's why they're calling for the independent mediator to come in and at least get both parties back to the table.
What have you made of it, Benny?
Well, I think the players, from my understanding, I'm not sure that all the ins and outs, but they've been forced into this, and we talk about whether we're hurting the fans or whether they should have just covered up the logo. But essentially, it's got all of us talking, and the game is not as great when we don't have the players speaking. And I think they feel like they've been backed into a corner and this is their only option. So, I'd be supportive of the players, and I agree, they need to get an independent mediator. They need to get back at the table. There's got to be a little bit of give from each side and get this sorted.
I would argue there'd be players that have absolutely no idea what they're doing.
Well, that's what Ricky Stewart has said.
There's always players. There's always players that don't know what's going on. Like as a player in a squad, you have your RLPA member. He's your rep. He's the one that go all the meetings.
So isn't that
and does
unfair that there's been players backed into a corner? To your point, Ben, they've been backed into a corner for what they have no reason to understand.
Yeah, but that's a union, isn't it? That's
the
what
part
a group
of
of people
it is
together
that-
is supposed to do.
And I think everyone understands that it's a team sport. Right, so I understand there's going to be guys like Ricky Stewart said that are in the squad that have no understanding of what's going on, but they're on board with what everyone's doing as a collective, and those players will stick together.
And there was
the only choice
I
is
think
to
there was
break away
also
from the union.
50 representatives that were at that in that room to make that decision to go on the boycott with the media. So when you take 50 people out of what 400 professional athletes, I mean, there's a fair majority of the delegates there that I'm sure that understand what's going on at a certain level.
Yeah,
wasn't one or two guys.
Absolutely. Look, it's quite radical action, but it's for at the moment until it's just this round, isn't it? And state of origin is my understanding.
I don't see how it moves.
Yeah.
All my information is that I don't see how they get to the table quickly
On this.
No.
Well, I guess that's right. And we're going to speak with the RLPA Player Operations Manager, Tom Symonds, in the next hour. But I guess that's the question is how far are they prepared to go in terms of withdrawing their labour? Do they actually not play? Do they ban games? How far will that...
Girls will be happy if they don't play that last State of Origin. You talked about just canning it. Maybe this is the opportunity.
Maybe Freddie's behind it.
Yeah, just can the third game.
Oh, that's not nice.
The players
mate.
don't want it.
That's nasty. Christian wouldn't have said that.
The actual dead rubber.
Look, and at the end of the day, the reality is, it's good for my work. I'm picking up invoices, so just keep it going, boys. I might get on there next week.
As we know, the Dragons went down to the Raiders 36-26. We heard from no players because of the ban that the Rugby League Players Association has for players being involved in pre-game, post-game, halftime interviews. Obviously, it is the big talking point of the weekend as it stretches into State of Origin as well. And we're joined right here, right now by the RLPA Player Operations Manager, Tom Symonds. G'day, Tom.
Tony, how are you, mate?
Very well, thank you. I guess the first question is, why was the action that we're now being part of, why was it necessary?
I think you need to look at the fact that players have been backed into a corner here after 20 months negotiating, trying to get through this. Are presented with a take it or leave it offer, and suppose after that long and a take it or leave it offer that had 100 changes, players felt just had to take some action to really try and bring it to a head.
Tom, Dave Riccio, can you just explain what the core issue is and why the decision was made? I'm really struggling with this. that's causing you to block yourself out from the very people who fund you, being the broadcasters and the fans who buy the tickets and the merchandise? So what's the issue, and why the decision to go down that path?
It's a good question, Dave. I think, as I said before, after 20 months of negotiating, we put forward, what we thought was a pretty reasonable settlement proposal. And then to get a proposal back with 100 changes from the NRL really forced players into a corner. You're talking about key things that they care about. So not a single dollar more is being asked for from players. And you're looking at things like, the ability for the NRL to add 2 more games to the season. I think that it's pretty reasonable that players have a say on that.
Hey, Tommy, Ryan Girdler, mate. Thanks for coming on, buddy. Dave and Tone spoke about, obviously, the decision by you guys to freeze out the media. So I'm just trying to understand the outcome potentially of that. Is it so that those media outlets then lean on the NRL to get them back to the table? I mean, what sort of outcome are you looking from the stance that you've taken? Not about the issues that you want resolved from the NRL, but just more about the stance that the players have taken with the media and the outcome, therefore, you're expecting with that. And what other options were there from the association to potentially get the reaction that you're after?
There's pros and cons of any action taken. I think players weighed up a whole range of different options, and I think there was, I suppose, a desire to make a strong stance. Again, there's going to be some collateral damage, but I think players really wanted to take a stand and take some strong action that was going to bring a light to the issues at hand. If you look at the last few days, there's probably been more reporting than we've seen in 6 months. So I suppose that was part of the action.
What, Tom, how would you describe the relationship between the RLPA and the NRL right now?
I'd say it's fairly fractured, no doubt. Things have fallen away the last couple of years, but I'd say there's a pathway forward here. If we can get this deal done, I'd like to think everyone can get back on the same page. But yeah, clearly there's a breakdown at the moment.
So since announcing the decisions that the RLPA have made here, I understand there's been absolutely no dialogue whatsoever in order to come back together and get back in the room. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I suppose that's pretty frustrating. You see, I suppose, some of the narratives being run, some of the agendas being run, rather than actually looking at how we actually solve this, which is quite frustrating. That's part and parcel of it. I'd like to think we can get to the bottom of it. I mean, we've proposed a way forward here, get an industrial relations mediator at the table to bring it to a head. That's what we're all hoping for here. There's been strong action taken, and obviously we all now understand why and what's behind it. Potentially trying to get that message through loud and clear, but there's a pathway forward.
To be fair, you speak about agendas being run. It's pretty difficult to understand the RLPA side of the story when the media aren't allowed to talk to the players.
Yeah, it's a good point. Players will be able to do media Monday through Wednesday. We've got players still doing their pre-committed media commitments. I think you had Woods on earlier, who shared some great points. There's some really clear messages there. And again, it's not on every single player to know every single detail of the CBA, but I think Woodsy did a great job of sharing some of those details. You look at other things we're talking about, simple things like financial reporting, important to players, control of their share of the revenue, the entire pot of money that has already been agreed. For players to have control of where that goes is pretty fundamental. I think it's pretty reasonable.
And then why, Tom, do you feel like the NRL are holding on to some of those key points for you guys so tightly?
I think it's about power and control. And to be fair, after receiving this deal back, there's no way we could actually recommend players accept it. And when you walk through it with our delegates, they completely understand why. I think, like I said, you're backed into a corner. You put forward something that's very reasonable, has some concessions from players in an attempt to get a deal done. And to get that back was pretty frustrating. And the take it or leave it nature of what's happened, players are backed into a corner. And so you can either stand up for yourself and what you believe in, and a number of these key issues that are going to impact players over this next 5 years, or you can say thanks, and accept what is an ordinary deal.
So the RLPA are happy to go to an independent mediator, industrial relations mediator. Why do you think the NRL haven't responded to that, and why do you think they might avoid that situation?
It's a good question. You'd have to ask the NRL for that. one of the beautiful things about where we're at the moment is we're really happy to put it out there side by side, both of our proposals. We've got nothing to hide. And I think the NRL should be the same. So you'd have to ask the NRL why they may be against that. We do think that's the path forward. We're trying to be as transparent as we can and cut through some of the misreporting here. And we're really happy to basically get that on the road. And I'm not sure why the NRL wouldn't accept that.
We're talking to RLPA Player Operations Manager Tom Symonds. Tom, what if after this action the NRL continues to dig its heels in? What's the pathway for you? Is it just continued this kind of industrial action? How far are you and the players prepared to go? And is there any disconnect between what's happening and the decisions being made and the entire playing group? Ricky Stewart saying some of the players don't even know why this action's taken and why they're being forced not to do it.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you raise. Happy to say that we've spent the last 6 weeks at every single NRL club, NRLW team, so 27 visits there. I called 50 of our leading players last week who all unanimously agreed for the action. So there may be one or two people that think otherwise, but I think we're pretty strong in our position. All players have had the opportunity to buy into the action. They feel extremely strongly, and to be fair, they've been pushing us to take a stronger stand for quite some time now. So I understand that's a narrative being run again, but I think it's completely off the mark, if I'm going to be honest. As I said, we've spent the last 6 weeks at 27 clubs, both men and women, who are across these actions, across what's happening, what's stopping the deal getting done. And so to hear comments like that's quite disappointing. I spoke to Ricky the other day. Obviously, agree to disagree on that one. He's got his job, but our job's to represent players and get a fair deal that we can actually stand behind. I think the whole industry should be pushing for that. Hopefully, the last few days have really shone a light on what's going on and what needs to get done for us to move forward.
Tom, can you understand that by blocking out the fans and the media that you're going to struggle to have that platform though? Like it's perception-wise, the fans don't see the players as being on the same level. They're putting themselves above the fans and the game by blocking them out. Can you understand the perception of what it looks like for the players?
I can take your point. I don't necessarily agree with it. There's players still doing photographs, social media, community engagements. All these types of things are still ongoing, and maybe there might be a fan or two that's not happy about hearing an interview. However, I ask you, what other option was there? Players are backed into a corner and needed to take a strong stance. So I suppose, would you be saying that they should take a stronger stance?
Is there any concern that the playing contracts of players, you could be in breach for not fulfilling the commitments of that contract, i.e. promotion of the game, media commitments?
Yeah, the players and us are well aware of the risks, just like any industrial action in any industry. Industrial action has risks. If that risk is on the table and players are still so determined and feel so passionately they want to take action, I have to say, why aren't you asking why? Why do players feel so strongly? Why is it that the NRL is holding this deal up? What are the reasons here? If players feel so strongly they're going to take action, despite there being risks, wouldn't you be asking why?
Tommy, just getting back to that question from a moment ago. So this action, if it ends at end of round 19 or whatever, and nothing happens, what next?
It's a good question. We'll reevaluate. There's no point sort of getting too far ahead, but we'll be ongoing. The ultimate goal here is to get the CBA done. I think that's been made pretty clear, and that's what the ultimate goal is, to get this draft CBA done and agreed. And players aren't going to stop until that is done. So where things head from here, it's hard to know exactly, but this stance isn't going to be going away.
All right, let's watch this space. Tom Symonds, thanks so much for giving me your time this afternoon. Great to talk to you.
Cheers, fellas. Thanks for having me.
Here is RLPA Player Operations Manager Tom Symonds. He's one of those guys who he handled it well in that he might disagree with you, but he's happy to answer your question.
Yeah, look. Again, I'm clear on where I stand.
Yeah,
I don't understand why they've chosen this path to block out the media, block out the fans. The broadcasters tip in $2 billion. They are the biggest share of revenue for the players, and they're shutting them out. They're biting the hand that feeds them. And I don't see how it's augured well.
We're talking about it.
But understanding, we are talking about it, and he's right. It's brought it to the forefront now that everyone's aware of it. But the other thing is, I feel like we're never really talking about the NRL, are we? We're always talking about the players, about them being unreasonable, and was this the right choice, and can we get it done? But we're not mentioning the fact that the NRL hasn't even responded. They haven't even come back to the table. How do you do a deal with someone that does not even want to talk, gives you take it or leave it, and wants to just have a power play on you? Now, the players are always going to be up there with the most important parts of our game, and I think they deserve a little bit more respect there. And I probably, agree with what they're doing at the moment, but where's the heat on the NRL? And that heat's going to come sooner or later when the broadcasters say, we have no content, no one is talking, this is not working, you need to get in that room with those players and sort this out. And that's what I think the power position for the players.
The RLPA have reached out to both broadcasters at this point in time, and the broadcasters have indicated that, I said it from the top, they're peed off.
Yeah. State of Origin 3 on Wednesday night in Sydney. Well, there's always something of a harder sell given it is a dead rubber, given that Queensland is 2 up, but do have the opportunity to get that clean sweep. The whitewash hasn't happened for years. But for New South Wales fans, it may have been something of a hard sell, more so with players not being able to speak. But certainly the coaches can talk about what they've done. And Ryan Girdler, it's fundamental changes, but I guess needed to happen in the Blues side of the equation.
Yeah, I think there's been 7 changes all up between Game 2 and Game 3. I think 3 of those might have been forced with injury. And then there's some other guys that have, only Bradman Best was probably the only real surprise. The other guys, like Walker comes back in, Campbell Gillard, Jake, those guys, are State of Origin players. And then you've got Kalamatangi, another guy that's come in on the back of some really good form, consistent form that he's been in and around the system for a while. But yeah, it's just all about, New South Wales understanding what they've done well in the opening 2 games, Tone, and being able to capitalise on that. Because even though we're going into a dead rubber, I don't think we got dominated, sure, on the scoreline in Game 2. But I really don't believe that we were dominated for the whole game. When you see, total dominant performances by a team, generally their halves don't get opportunity. There's no momentum created by the forwards. They're always playing off the back foot. I haven't seen that in the 2 games that we've had for New South Wales. So, New South Wales have really struggled to take, the opportunities that have been created by some of the forwards in the middle. So I think there need to be changes around the guys that, they needed to bring in that they felt they could, accumulate some points on the back of that possession and momentum. And I think they've done that with Cody Walker. I can't wait to see Cody. He's one of the most talented ball players in the contest and, in the competition. He plays with great tempo. He always gets the ball where it needs to go. And on the back of hopefully some field position and some opportunity, he can convert some of those chances. Looking forward to that.
You mentioned him. Well, Greg Alexander was very glowing in his praise of Cody Walker when he was asked during training this week. Have a listen to what he had to say.
Cody's just a great player. Cody's just, he's one of the best ball players I think we've seen in the game, in the history of the game. And I can't go back any further than sort of the early 80s, but... and I've spoken about this many times. Cody reminds me so much of Cliffy with the time that he has with the ball, and you can see that at training. So I'm excited to watch Cody play.
Cody Walker is one of the best ball players in the history of the game. It's one that he wasn't picked a little bit earlier.
Well,
exactly.
I think he was going to be picked in Game 2, Tone. He was going to be picked in Game 2, except he
might have been in a conversation Game 1, sure.
He had that quad injury, and they stuck with Luai. Geez, I would have loved to have seen what might have been. What might have been in Game 2 might have been a bit of a different game. I know one player doesn't, change a scoreline like that, but it's what could have been for New South Wales.
Yeah.
Clint Gutherson on the bench, guys. I'm a big fan of Gutho, but it's a surprise selection for me on the bench. They're clearly looking for a utility to fill that void.
I don't see it, Dave. It feels to me like it's a reaction from what happened in Game 2. But you've got a guy like Isaiah Yeo on the bench. And, I watched him come through the system on the wing and in the centres for Penrith. And he's a guy that he might have lost a little bit of speed, but at a pinch, if you needed an outside back, you can throw him in the centres, you throw Crichton onto the wing.
Cam Murray, he's always
Cam
a guy
Murray,
that
even
could play
though
in the
he's in the middle, and I
Damien
get how
Cook.
important he is in the middle because we saw that last time when he came on. But to carry Gutho on the bench is, it's a little bit of a mystery to me, but I guess they feel like they can.
How does he get
play
into the
Robson
game?
in the middle.
How does he get
I
in?
don't know. Well, you got Spencer Linu there.
I hope they
in the-
use him because, again, it's a little bit like the Nico Hines one, like if you carry someone just in case and then, you don't really need to get to use them and you find a way just to get them on.
And that's the thing.
Doesn't
and,
make sense.
And sometimes things don't go to plan, so you get caught out that you didn't have that position, but that doesn't mean the next game that it's going to happen again. So I think you got to have those guys with that utility value. Can we talk about Queensland?
Yeah, before you do that, can I just finish up on that? Dylan Edwards didn't get the tap, and Scott Drinkwater did in terms of in the squad, 18th or 19th man. So, we're talking earlier, Girds, where does that put Dylan Edwards in the pecking order in New South Wales fullback? So we've got Teddy, then you'd probably have Tommy and Latrell both, playing centres, but ahead of him. You've got Gutho because he's been picked here. You've got Scott Drinkwater. So Dylan Edwards is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th best fullback in New South Wales.
My understanding is that the Blues didn't want to disrespect Dylan Edwards by picking him on the wing. I think if there was a change to be made, and I've got no doubt there would have been some internal discussion about whether to pick James Tedesco in this final game, and at that point, Dylan Edwards would have been the fullback. But they didn't want to go down the path of picking him on the wing.
But do you bring him into camp?
Yeah, why not? They've brought plenty of players in, Benny.
Dylan Edwards is the kind of guy that would walk over hot coals to get that Blues jersey.
Yeah.
Regardless of what number it had on it.
Yep.
He's the type of guy that represents the player that everyone wants to play with, the player that the state want to support, the player that deserves the recognition for the form that he's been in over the last 3 or 4 years, regardless of what number he wears. I just want to see Dylan, like a lot of other people, in a blue jersey.
Yeah. But I also think Billy's done it well by he names his 17 and his 18th and 19th man are literally the next guys in line. Last in game 2 he had AJ Brimson as his 18th man. All right, you lose an outside back, boom, he's in. There's no mucking around. There's no mind games. It's just you're in this camp because we want you in here. We want you to be a part of it. You are a part of it, and you're the next in line. And I think Dylan Edwards not even really being in the squad, that's the issue I'd have with that.
In review of this entire Origin series for New South Wales, they have to look at their preparation and selections. They can no longer go down the path of picking 50-50 fit players on whether they're physically ready to go. When I talk to the Queensland camp, it is there is such a priority and a primary focus on preparation starts day one. And it is in the selections. They do not pick players that are carrying a niggle under an injury cloud where he just needs to get to Thursday. And if he can get to Thursday, we'll see how he is again on Sunday in the lead up to a Wednesday Origin.
Yeah, but that's easy to say, Dave, when it's not happening. And I would imagine if Cam Munster...
he didn't pick Kalen Ponga, mate.
Or Cherry
Evans.
He
didn't pick Kalen Ponga because of his head knock fears.
Yeah, but
you could have easily rolled the dice on Kalen Ponga.
but Kalen Ponga, well, you got Reece Walsh knocking on the door, and it's heavily contested position.
James Tedesco is fullback, and we've got Dylan Edwards knocking on the door. Yeah, they didn't.
But he hasn't been unfit.
Pick unfit players.
Tedesco hasn't been unfit.
No, I'm using it as an example as the depth of our fullbacks, as you use depth of their fullbacks.
No. But you're talking about bringing players in injured, and I just said that if Cam Munster, I know they've got Didden, but it's just different. And when you got a guy like Latrell Mitchell or Cam Murray that are such a core part of your squad, and you rule them out on day one because they can't train on that first couple of days, it's really hard to not sort of be guided by the influence that player has on that team dynamic.
Girds, do you think bringing South Sydney physios into camp is a sure sign of a smooth sailing preparation?
No.
Thank you.
That wasn't the question.
The other thing I think where Billy's got the players, he's got them right where he wants them. For instance, Cobbo did a great job in game 1, right? And then he got injured. He lost his spot. Xavier Coates came in and did a great job, and Cobbo doesn't get a spot back. I still think Cobbo's a better player, but it was the fact that Xavier, you came in, I asked you to do your job, you did your job, you stay. And that's where you create that environment of like everyone just knows I need to play so well here or I'm going to lose my spot, or I play well and I keep it.
And I really think that's the most important thing to come out of, this whole New South Wales campaign is I just really hope that messaging around, what the players that have come in and out need to do to come back.
Yeah.
And those relationships that are really important at that level are really clear. Like the messaging is really clear for those guys that have been left out, whether they've been brought back in, because those relationships, if they become frayed, that can have a massive impact on that whole group moving forward.